When Sarah discovers a decades-old letter hidden in her late mother's Bible, she uncovers a family secret that spans 3 generations. A secret about sacrifice, impossible choices, and a love that never died. What she finds will make her question everything she thought she knew about the woman who raised her. The attic smelled of dust and memories, that particular scent of time standing still, old wood, mothballs, and something sweeter underneath, like dried flowers pressed between forgotten pages. Sarah Mitchell climbed the creaking stairs with a cardboard box in her arms, adding it to the growing collection of things she couldn't bear to sort through yet. 3 months since the funeral, and her mother's house still felt occupied, as if Eleanor Mitchell might walk through the door at any moment, tutting about the mess, adjusting the crooked frame on the hallway wall like she always did. The November light filtered through the small octagonal window, casting geometric shadows across the cluttered space. Sarah had been avoiding this room, avoiding all of it really. The clothes still hanging in the closet downstairs, the half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen table, the reading glasses perched on the arm of the burgundy recliner where her mother had spent her last comfortable days. But the estate lawyer had been patient enough, and the house needed to be listed by Christmas. Time, as always, was running out. She set the box down and wiped her hands on her jeans, leaving dusty streaks across the denim. At 42, Sarah had inherited her mother's careful hands, the same long fingers that had braided her hair every morning before school, that had signed permission slips and folded countless loads of laundry. But unlike Eleanor, Sarah bit her nails, a nervous habit that had started in college and never left. She was doing it now, thumb working at the corner of her index finger as she surveyed the accumulated archaeology of her mother's life. The trunks were military precise, labeled in Eleanor's perfect cursive, holiday decorations, tax records 1985-1995, Sarah's school papers. That last one made her throat tight. Her mother had kept everything: crayon drawings, spelling tests with gold stars, the essay about heroism where 9-year-old Sarah had written that her mother was the bravest person in the world because she wasn't afraid of spiders or thunderstorms. If only she had known then what bravery really meant. Sarah pulled that trunk toward her, the metal hinges protesting with age. Inside, her childhood smiled back at her in layers: report cards, birthday cards signed in her mother's steady hand, a Valentine's shoebox decorated with glitter and lace from 3rd grade. Beneath it all, wrapped in tissue paper that crinkled like dry leaves, she found the photograph, the one from the hospital the day she was born. Eleanor looked impossibly young, just 23. Her dark hair pulled back, exhaustion and joy mixing in equal measure on her face as she cradled the bundled infant. Alone. Sarah had never thought about it before, how alone her mother looked in that moment. No partner beside the bed, no family crowding in with balloons and flowers, just Eleanor and her daughter, beginning their story together. She set the photo aside gently and continued excavating. More pictures, more memories. Then her hand struck something solid at the bottom of the trunk. The Bible, of course. Eleanor's Bible, the one she'd kept on her nightstand for as long as Sarah could remember. Black leather, worn soft at the corners, the gilt edges of the pages tarnished to a muted gold. Sarah lifted it carefully, surprised by its weight, both physical and otherwise. Her mother had read from this book every night before sleep. Sarah could picture her so clearly, Eleanor in her reading glasses, lips moving slightly as she worked through a passage, one finger trailing down the page. It had been her ritual, her anchor. When Sarah was small, she'd sometimes crawl into her mother's bed, and Eleanor would read aloud, her voice transforming ancient words into something alive and immediate. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Those words had been a lullaby, a promise, a shield against the dark. Sarah opened the Bible now, and immediately something fluttered free. A pressed flower, papery and fragile, landing on her knee. A forget-me-not, the blue faded to almost grey. She picked it up carefully, held it to the light. When had her mother pressed this? And why here in the Book of Ruth, of all places? Sarah had never paid much attention to Bible stories, despite her mother's gentle attempts to interest her. She knew the famous ones: Noah and his ark, David and Goliath, Jesus walking on water. But Ruth? She'd have to look it up. She turned the pages slowly, reverently, seeing her mother's handwriting in the margins. Small notes, dates, underlined verses. In Genesis, January 3rd, 1978, Sarah's first day of kindergarten, let me trust your plan. In Psalms, September 8th, 1992, difficult day, but I will praise you still. Sarah's eyes blurred. These were prayers, journal entries, conversations with God that she'd never known about. Her mother's inner life, hidden in plain sight all these years. Then she reached the book of Matthew, and something shifted beneath her fingers. The pages here were slightly thicker, as if something had been pressed between them for so long it had changed the texture of the paper itself. Sarah opened it carefully, and there it was, an envelope yellowed with age, unsealed. No address, no stamp, just a name written on the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. A man's handwriting, strong and slanted. For Eleanor, if anything happens to me. The attic seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere below the old house settled, wood creaking against wood. Sarah's heart kicked hard against her ribs, that instinctive recognition that she was standing at a threshold, that opening this envelope would mean crossing into territory she couldn't return from. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the flap. Inside, there were 3 sheets of paper folded together. The first was clearly the letter, written in that same masculine hand. The second appeared to be some kind of official document, though she couldn't make out details in the dim light. And the third, her breath caught, was a photograph of a man she'd never seen before. He was young, maybe mid-20s, wearing a military uniform. Army, she thought, though she didn't know enough about such things to be certain. He had kind eyes and an easy smile, standing in front of what looked like barracks, sunlight turning everything golden and timeless. Sarah's hands were shaking in earnest now. She unfolded the letter with the care of an archaeologist, uncovering something precious and fragile. The paper was thin, the kind that came from a different era, and the ink had faded to a soft brown. The date at the top made her dizzy. July 16th, 1974. The year before she was born. My dearest Eleanor, it began, and Sarah had to stop, had to breathe, had to reconcile this tender salutation with everything she thought she knew about her mother's life. Eleanor Mitchell, as far as Sarah had ever known, had been alone. Magnificently, stubbornly alone. When other kids at school asked about her father, Sarah had learned to say, "It's just me and my mum," with a shrug that suggested it was no big deal, even though sometimes late at night, she wondered what it would be like to have a dad who taught you to ride a bike or scared away the monsters under the bed. Her mother had never spoken about him, not once. When Sarah got old enough to ask directly around age 10 or 11, Eleanor had simply said, "Your father and I weren't meant to be together, sweetheart, but you were meant to be, and that's all that matters." It was delivered with such finality, such gentle firmness, that Sarah had learned not to press. Over time, she'd constructed her own mythology. A brief romance, a man who'd left, a mother who'd been strong enough to raise a daughter on her own. She'd never imagined there might be another story, one written in fading ink and hidden between Bible verses. Sarah angled the letter toward the window light and began to read, her mother's past unfurling before her like a map to a country she'd never known existed. "My dearest Eleanor, I'm writing this because I need you to know the truth, all of it, before I ship out. If I don't come back, and we both know that's possible, even though we don't like to say it out loud, I want you to have something from me beyond memories. I want you to have words, tangible proof that what we felt was real, that it mattered, that you mattered more than anything else in my world." Sarah's eyes raced ahead, hungry for details, for context, for the shape of this secret. "I know what we decided. I know you said it was better this way, that a clean break would be kinder to everyone, especially to her. Your sister deserves happiness, and God knows James is a good man, even if he's not the man you would have chosen. But Eleanor, my love, my heart, you have to know that walking away from you is the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than basic training, harder than saying goodbye to my parents, harder than anything this war will ask of me." Sarah's mind stumbled over the words. Her sister? Her mother had a sister. The questions piled up faster than she could process them, but she forced herself to keep reading, to let the story unfold at its own pace. I keep thinking about that day by the lake, the one in June when we skipped the rehearsal dinner and drove out to Silver Point instead. Do you remember? The sun was setting, turning everything amber and gold, and you said that no matter what happened, you'd never forget how free you felt in that moment. You made me promise I'd always remember it too, that I'd carry it with me wherever I went. I'm keeping that promise. When things get dark over there, when I'm scared or lonely or questioning why any of this matters, I'll close my eyes and see you the way you looked that evening. Your hair all wild from the wind, your feet in the water laughing at something I said. That's what I'm fighting for, Eleanor. Not some abstract idea of freedom or democracy, but that moment, that feeling, that version of you who was entirely yourself. The letter continued, and Sarah learned in fragments what her mother had never told her. The writer's name was Michael Carver. He'd been her mother's first love, maybe her only real love. They'd met at a county fair the summer after Eleanor graduated from high school, 1967, Sarah calculated quickly. He was 2 years older, working construction while he figured out what came next. They'd fallen hard and fast, the way young people do, with all the intensity and certainty that comes before life teaches you about compromise and consequence. But there was a complication. Eleanor's younger sister, Diane, who was fragile, who struggled with what Michael's letter delicately called dark spells. What Sarah suspected would now be diagnosed as depression or anxiety. Diane had fallen for Michael too, had convinced herself that he was the answer to all her problems, that his love would save her from herself. And when Michael had tried to gently extricate himself, had tried to explain that his heart belonged to Eleanor, Diane had threatened to hurt herself. Sarah pressed her hand to her mouth, horror and empathy warring inside her. What an impossible situation, what an unbearable choice. The letter laid it out with devastating clarity. Eleanor had made a decision. She'd stepped aside, told Michael he should give Diane a chance, that her sister needed him more than she did. And Michael, God help him, had agreed, even though it was tearing him apart. He'd tried to love Diane, had tried to be the man she needed. They'd gotten engaged. There was going to be a wedding. But then came the draft. 1973. Michael's number had come up, and by early 74 he was shipping out to Vietnam. The war was supposedly winding down, but men were still dying, still coming home in boxes or not coming home at all. I'm telling you this now, Michael had written, because I can't marry her, Eleanor. I thought I could do it. I thought if I tried hard enough, if I was good enough, I could make it work. But I can't build a life on a lie. I can't stand at an altar and promise forever to someone when my heart has been yours since the moment we met. I've broken off the engagement. I told Diane the truth. Not all of it. I spared her that. But enough. She's devastated, and I hate myself for that. Your parents are furious with me. James has offered to step in to help Diane through this, and maybe that's for the best. Maybe he can give her what she needs in a way I never could. James. Sarah knew that name. Uncle James, her mother's brother-in-law, married to Aunt Diane. They'd visited occasionally when Sarah was growing up, awkward holiday dinners where the adults smiled too much and said too little. Sarah had always sensed a tension there, an undercurrent she couldn't name. Now she understood. But you, my Eleanor, I need you to know that even though I'm leaving, even though there's a very real chance I won't come back, you are the great love of my life. You are the reason I believe in goodness, in beauty, in God. If I die over there, I'll die with your name on my lips. And if by some miracle I survive, I'm coming back to you. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what anyone says. We've already sacrificed enough for other people's happiness. Maybe it's time to choose our own. The letter was signed simply, "Forever yours, Michael." Sarah sat back, her mind reeling. The photograph made sense now. This was Michael Carver, the man her mother had loved. But what had happened? Why had Eleanor ended up alone, raising Sarah by herself? Had Michael died in Vietnam? Had he come back and changed his mind? And the biggest question of all, the one that made Sarah's whole body go cold, who was her father? She looked at the photograph again, studying Michael's face with new intensity, the shape of his eyes, the line of his jaw, looking for herself in his features, for some genetic echo that would explain everything. But she couldn't tell. She couldn't know. Not from a photograph alone. The second document was still folded in her lap, and now she opened it with trembling fingers, knowing somehow that this was where the answer would be found. It was a birth certificate. Not hers. She had her own, filed away somewhere in her apartment across town. This one was older, more formal in its typography. The names swam before her eyes. Michael James Carver, born April 9th, 1946. And there at the bottom, a second document clipped to the first, a marriage license dated August 20th, 1974, 1 month after the letter. The names: Michael James Carver and Eleanor Rose Brennan. They had gotten married. Sarah needed to move, to pace, to do something with the electricity coursing through her body. She stood up too quickly, the Bible slipping from her lap and landing with a soft thump on the attic floor. The sound echoed in the enclosed space, accusatory somehow, as if she'd dropped something sacred. She retrieved it carefully, placed it back in the trunk, but kept the letter, the photograph, and the documents clutched in her hand. Her mother had been married. The woman who'd raised her alone, who'd never mentioned a husband, who'd worn no wedding ring and kept no photographs of a man on the mantel. She'd been married to Michael Carver. And that meant... Sarah's breath came short and sharp. That meant Michael was her father. Not some nameless figure who'd abandoned them, but a man who'd loved her mother enough to write letters like this, who'd broken an engagement for her, who'd married her. So where was he? Why didn't she know him? What had happened between August of 1974 and March of 1975, when Sarah was born? The questions drove her down from the attic, down the narrow stairs, through the hallway where family photographs lined the walls, all of them featuring just Sarah and Eleanor, two against the world. She found herself in her mother's bedroom, a space she'd been avoiding since the funeral. It felt like trespassing even now, even though Eleanor was gone and the house legally belonged to Sarah. The bed was still made, hospital corners crisp and perfect. The novel on the nightstand was still bookmarked at page 137, a story Eleanor would never finish. The closet still held her clothes, organized by season and color, each hanger precisely spaced. Sarah opened the dresser drawers, feeling like a thief, searching for what she didn't know. Sweaters, folded with tissue paper between them. Pajamas, soft with age. Scarves in the bottom drawer, a rainbow of silk and wool. And there, beneath the scarves, a small wooden box, lacquered and foreign-looking with brass hinges that had turned green with oxidation. She lifted it out, set it on the bed, opened it. Inside, more fragments of a hidden life. Letters, dozens of them, tied with a faded ribbon, all in that same masculine handwriting, all addressed to Eleanor, with return addresses from various military bases, and then later from an apartment in Philadelphia. Sarah did the math. Philadelphia was 3 hours from where they'd lived, where Eleanor had raised her in this small Ohio town. Close enough to visit. So why hadn't he? She untied the ribbon with care, selected a letter at random. This one was dated November 1974, postmarked from Fort Benning, Georgia. "My wife," it began, and even now, decades later, and filtered through paper, Sarah could hear the joy in those 2 words. My wife. I'll never get tired of saying it, writing it, thinking it. You are my wife, and I am the luckiest man who ever lived. The letter described Michael's training, his unit, his hopes of being stationed stateside rather than deployed. The war was ending, he wrote, truly ending this time. There was talk of complete withdrawal, of bringing everyone home. He was optimistic. They were making plans. He'd get out by spring, they'd find a place together, maybe go back to school on the GI Bill. He wanted to be a teacher, he wrote. History or English he hadn't decided yet. He wanted a life that mattered, work that built rather than destroyed, and he wanted a family. I know we agreed to wait, he wrote, but I can't help imagining it. A little girl with your eyes or a boy with your courage. Someday, my love, someday soon, when the world settles down and we can just be us, without all these complications and distances. Sarah's hands shook so badly she had to set the letter down. A little girl with your eyes. She touched her own face. The eyes she'd always been told were her best feature, deep brown and thoughtful. Eleanor's eyes, everyone had always said, but now she wondered if they were also Michael's. She grabbed another letter, this one from January 1975. The tone had shifted. Michael was coming home, his service completed, honorably discharged. He was taking a job in Philadelphia, had found an apartment, small but affordable. "I know you wanted to stay closer to your family," he wrote, "and I understand why after everything that happened with Diane. But sweetheart, we need some distance. We need space to build our own life without your mother's cold silences and your father's judgment. James has been kind enough, and I'm grateful he's looking after Diane, but the rest of them, Eleanor, they'll never forgive us, you know that. They'll never accept what we did. So let's give ourselves permission to start fresh. You can take the train down next week, and we'll make the apartment into a home. We'll paint the bedroom that color you loved, that soft blue like robin's eggs. We'll hang curtains and buy dishes and play house for real." But there was a postscript, added in different ink, as if written later, in a different state of mind. "I got your call. I understand what the doctor said. I understand you're scared. But Eleanor, this is a blessing, not a complication. Yes, it's sooner than we planned, but we're married. We love each other. We can do this. We're going to be parents, and I've never wanted anything more. Please don't shut me out. Please call me back." Sarah's vision blurred. Her mother had been pregnant, with her, and she'd been scared, uncertain, not ready. The timeline made sense now. Married in August, pregnant by December or January, Sarah born in March. She'd been unexpected, a surprise that had arrived before her parents were prepared. The next letter was shorter, more desperate. March 5th, 1975, 8 days before Sarah's birthday. "Eleanor, I don't understand why you won't talk to me. I've called 17 times. Your mother hangs up the moment she hears my voice. Your father won't even answer. Please, sweetheart. I know you're due any day now. I should be there. I want to be there. This is our child, our daughter. Yes, I know you think it's a girl, and you're probably right. You usually are. I want to meet her, hold her, be her father. Whatever scared you, whatever changed, we can fix it. We can work through it together. Just, please, talk to me." Then, nothing. The next letter was dated 6 months later, September 1975. The handwriting looked different, shakier, as if written by someone who'd forgotten how to hold a pen steady. "I understand now. Your lawyer made it very clear. You don't want me in your life or Sarah's life. You filed for annulment, claiming the marriage was a mistake, that I coerced you somehow. Eleanor, how can you say these things? How can you rewrite our history like this? But if this is truly what you want, if you honestly believe Sarah is better off without me, then I'll respect it. I'll sign the papers. I'll walk away. But know this, I will never stop loving you, and I will never stop being her father, even if she never knows my name. There will be money every month sent through the lawyer, so you never have to see me or speak to me. I can't give you much, but I can give you that. And I'll pray every single day that someday you'll change your mind, that someday you'll let me know the daughter I've only seen in photographs." The letter ended there. No signature, just a trailing off into silence. Sarah sat on her mother's bed, surrounded by letters that told a story she'd never known, that reshaped everything she understood about her own origins. Her father hadn't left. He'd been pushed away. Her mother, for reasons Sarah couldn't yet understand, had chosen to raise her alone, had chosen to let Michael Carver fade into obscurity, a secret kept for 42 years. The betrayal stung, hot and immediate. All those times she'd asked about her father, all those carefully constructed lies about how some things are complicated, and the past is the past. Eleanor could have told her the truth, could have said, "Your father wanted to be in your life, but I didn't let him." Could have given her the choice to know him, to have a relationship with him. Instead, she'd erased him, rewritten history, and left Sarah to grow up believing she came from a place of abandonment rather than sacrifice. But even as the anger rose, another feeling complicated it. Curiosity about what had happened, what had driven Eleanor to such an extreme decision. The woman who'd raised her had been kind, patient, loving in her quiet way. She'd never been cruel or selfish. There had to be more to the story, something these letters hadn't revealed yet. Sarah forced herself to slow down, to read chronologically, to piece together the narrative properly. She spread the letters across the bed, organized them by date, created a timeline. August 1974, marriage. December or January, pregnancy. March 13th, 1975, Sarah's birth. March through August, silence, no letters from Michael in the collection, which meant Eleanor must have stopped answering them, stopped saving them. September, the final letter, the resignation, the agreement to step away. But what had happened in those months between March and September? What had changed Eleanor's mind so completely? Sarah dug deeper into the wooden box. Beneath the letters she found more documents, hospital paperwork from the birth, listing Eleanor as the mother and the father as unknown. That must have been changed later, after Eleanor filed for the annulment. A court document, dense with legal language, officially dissolving the marriage on grounds of fraud and misrepresentation. Sarah's hands clenched. Fraud? What fraud? The document didn't specify, and she suspected it was just whatever legal language Eleanor's lawyer had used to make the annulment possible. Then, at the very bottom of the box, wrapped in a handkerchief embroidered with tiny blue flowers, she found a small silver ring. Simple, unadorned, too large for her mother's finger. A man's ring. She held it up to the light, saw the inscription inside. E+M, August 20th, 1974. Eleanor and Michael. Their wedding rings. Her mother had kept it all these years, hidden away but not destroyed, a secret talisman of a love that had mattered, even if it hadn't lasted. Sarah slipped the ring onto her thumb, the only finger it would fit, and felt a strange connection to the man she'd never known, the father who'd wanted her before she was born, who'd fought to be in her life, and lost. What must that have been like, she wondered, to know you had a daughter out there in the world growing up without you? Did he still think about her? Did he celebrate her birthday every March 13th? Wonder what she looked like, what kind of person she'd become, and was he still alive? The thought hit her like lightning, sudden and illuminating. She'd been so absorbed in the past, in unraveling this mystery, that she hadn't considered the present. Michael Carver would be 79 years old now. He might still be living, might be in Philadelphia or somewhere else, might have remarried, might have other children. She might have half-siblings she'd never met, a whole other family she knew nothing about. Her phone was in her back pocket. She pulled it out, hands still trembling, and typed Michael James Carver, Philadelphia, into the search bar. The results were overwhelming. Dozens of social media profiles, obituaries, news articles, all featuring different Michael Carvers. None of them obviously the right one. She needed more information, a middle name or a birth date or something to narrow it down. The birth certificate. She'd left it upstairs in the attic. Sarah ran, taking the stairs two at a time, her heart hammering. She found it where she'd dropped it, in the trunk with her mother's Bible. Michael James Carver, born April 9th, 1946, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Parents listed as Ruth Ann Carver and James Michael Carver. That gave her more to work with. Back downstairs, back to her phone, refining the search. And there, on the third page of results, an obituary that made her blood run cold. Ruth Ann Carver, age 89, of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, passed away peacefully on October 2nd, 2015. She is survived by her son, Michael James Carver of Portland, Oregon. Portland. He'd moved across the country, as far from this story as he could get. But he was alive, or at least he had been 9 years ago when his mother died. Sarah's grandmother, she realized with a start. Ruth Ann Carver had been her grandmother, and she'd died without ever knowing Sarah existed. Portland, Oregon. That was where the trail led. Sarah opened a new search, typed Michael Carver, Portland, Oregon, held her breath while the results loaded. And there, on a professional networking site, she found him, Michael J. Carver, retired high school history teacher, resident of Portland. The profile picture showed a man in his late 70s, silver-haired and weathered, but still recognizably the same person from the photograph taken 50 years ago. The same kind eyes, though now surrounded by decades of laugh lines and life experience. He was smiling in the photo, standing in front of a bookshelf, looking exactly like what he'd wanted to be all those years ago when he'd written to Eleanor about his dreams. Sarah stared at the screen until her eyes burned. This was her father, Michael J. Carver, who taught history to teenagers who lived in Portland, who existed in the world right now, breathing and thinking and going about his life, completely unaware that she was looking at his picture, holding his wedding ring, reading his love letters. Should she contact him? Did he even want to hear from her after all this time? He'd written in that last letter that he'd never stop being her father, but that was 49 years ago. People changed. Pain faded or hardened into resentment. Maybe he'd built a new life, one that didn't include room for the daughter who'd been kept from him. Maybe reaching out would only cause more harm, reopening wounds that had finally scarred over. But maybe, and this was the thought that made her hands shake with something closer to hope than fear, maybe he'd been waiting all this time. Maybe he'd wondered about her the same way she was wondering about him. Maybe there was still time to know each other, even if they'd missed so much already. Sarah closed the laptop, her decision not yet made, but forming somewhere in the space between her ribs and her spine. First, she needed to understand why Eleanor had done what she'd done. Her mother was gone, unreachable, unable to defend her choices or explain her reasoning. But there had to be something, some clue Sarah had missed, some piece of the puzzle that would make sense of the senseless. She went back to the wooden box, emptied it completely this time, shook out the handkerchief in case something was wrapped inside. Nothing. Checked the lining of the box itself, ran her fingers along the seams, looking for a hidden compartment or a false bottom. Nothing. The letters were all she had, and they told only Michael's side of the story. Eleanor had left no journal, no explanation, no defense. Or had she? Sarah's eyes went to the Bible, still sitting in the trunk upstairs. Eleanor had hidden Michael's letter there, between the pages of Matthew. What if there was more? What if her mother had left her own account, her own version of events, tucked somewhere in those thin pages? Back to the attic, back to the trunk, back to the Bible that had been her mother's constant companion for decades. Sarah lifted it out with reverence this time, understanding that it was more than just a book. It was Eleanor's confessional, her diary, her way of working through the impossible choices she'd had to make. The pressed forget-me-not was still there in Ruth's story, and Sarah paused over it now, reading the verses with new attention. Ruth, the widow who'd left her homeland to stay with her mother-in-law Naomi. "Where you go, I will go," she'd promised. "Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." It was a story about loyalty, about choosing love over ease, about women supporting each other through grief and uncertainty. Why had Eleanor pressed a flower here of all places? Sarah turned pages carefully, looking for more markers, more signs of her mother's interior life. In 1 Corinthians, she found another note in the margin next to the famous verses about love. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Eleanor had underlined that last phrase twice and written beside it, December 1974. I must remember this. December, when she would have just found out she was pregnant with Sarah. What had she needed to forget? What wrongs had she been trying to release? The Bible was full of such breadcrumbs, dates, prayers, questions posed to God and left unanswered on the page. Then, tucked into the book of Proverbs, Sarah found another envelope. This one was addressed in her mother's handwriting, and the name on it stopped Sarah's heart. For Sarah, when she's old enough to understand. This was it. The explanation she'd been searching for. Her hands shook so badly she could barely open the envelope, but she managed it, pulled out the pages inside, 4 of them, covered in Eleanor's careful script. The date at the top was June 3rd, 2023. Just last year, when her mother's illness had been diagnosed, when she'd known she was dying. Eleanor had written this knowing Sarah would read it after she was gone, a message sent across the boundary of death. "My dearest Sarah," it began, and just seeing those words in her mother's handwriting brought tears that Sarah had been holding back for months. "If you're reading this, it means you found Michael's letter. I've gone back and forth so many times about whether to leave it for you, whether the truth would be a gift or a burden. In the end, I decided you deserve to know where you came from, even if it's complicated. Especially because it's complicated." Sarah read on, her mother's voice clear in every sentence, explaining what the letters had not. I loved Michael Carver more than I thought it was possible to love another human being. When I chose to step aside so he could be with Diane, it felt like cutting out my own heart. But I did it because I thought it was right, because I thought my sister needed him more than I did. Diane had always been fragile, and after the episode where well, I won't go into details, but it was serious enough that I was genuinely afraid for her life. So I made the sacrifice. I told myself it was noble, that it was what good sisters did for each other. But then Michael broke off the engagement and everything fell apart. Diane did try to hurt herself, and she ended up hospitalized for 3 months. My parents blamed Michael entirely, refused to see that the situation was more complex than that. James, bless him, stepped in. He'd always cared for Diane from afar, and he was patient in a way Michael could never have been. They married within the year, and honestly, I think they were better suited than Michael and Diane ever would have been. Michael came back for me, just like he'd promised in his letters. We married quietly, quickly, before my family could object or interfere. Those first few months were the happiest of my life, even with the distance while he was finishing his service. I was so certain we'd make it work, that love would be enough to overcome all the obstacles. Then I got pregnant with you and everything changed. Sarah's breath caught. Here was the turning point, the moment that had altered all their lives. Not because I didn't want you, please don't ever think that. I wanted you from the moment I knew you existed. But the pregnancy was difficult, complicated by a condition called placenta previa. I was on bed rest for most of it, and my doctor said there was a real risk I might not survive the delivery. I had to stay with my parents, where they could help care for me, and that meant being away from Michael. Being back in the town where everyone knew about the scandal, where I could feel the judgment every time someone looked at me. My mother, God rest her soul, was not a gentle woman when she was angry. She made it very clear that she thought I'd ruined Diane's life, that I was selfish and cruel, that everything bad that had happened was my fault. And Sarah, I was so tired, so scared, so overwhelmed. I started to believe her. I started to think that maybe I had been selfish, that maybe I'd chosen my own happiness over my sister's well-being, and look what it had cost everyone. Sarah wanted to reach back through time, to tell her mother that none of it was her fault, that you can't save someone from themselves, that choosing love isn't a crime, but she could only read, could only witness the unfolding of a tragedy that had already happened. Then Diane came to visit me, about a month before you were born. She was doing better, married to James, stable on her medication. We had tea in the garden and she told me she forgave me. But then she said something that haunted me. I'm glad it worked out this way. James loves me for who I am, not despite who I am. Michael would have always been comparing me to you, always wishing I was different. You did us both a favor by marrying him. You kept him from ruining my life even more than he already did. I knew she didn't mean it the way it sounded. She was trying to make peace, to find some silver lining in all the pain. But the words burrowed into me like thorns. You kept him from ruining my life. What if that's what I'd done? What if by marrying Michael, I'd saved Diane from a marriage that would have destroyed her? But then what did that make me? Someone who'd taken advantage of my sister's crisis to get what I wanted. The letter continued, and Sarah read about her mother's deteriorating mental state in those final weeks of pregnancy, the way fear and guilt had twisted together into something dark and overwhelming. Eleanor had convinced herself that she didn't deserve happiness, that her love for Michael was tainted by the circumstances that had made it possible. She'd started to see their marriage as something selfish, something wrong, even though rationally she knew that wasn't true. And then you were born, and I nearly died, just like the doctors had warned. There were complications. I hemorrhaged badly. They had to perform an emergency hysterectomy to save my life. I woke up 3 days later to find out I'd survived, but I'd never be able to have another child. You were my only one, my miracle, and the cost of bringing you into the world was everything I'd imagined my future would hold. Michael came to the hospital as soon as he heard. He was so relieved I was alive, so in love with you, so ready to be a family. But Sarah, I looked at him holding you, and all I could feel was this crushing weight of everything we'd destroyed to get to that moment. Diane's mental health, my relationship with my parents, my own body, now marked forever by what I'd lost. It felt like the universe was punishing us for being together, and I couldn't let you grow up in the shadow of that guilt. Here it was, the revelation Sarah had been dreading and needing in equal measure. I told Michael it was over. I told him I'd made a mistake, that we shouldn't have gotten married, that I needed to focus on you and on healing. He fought me on it. Of course he did. He said all the right things, that we could work through it, that what I was feeling was just trauma and hormones and fear, that he loved me and nothing else mattered. But I'd already made up my mind. I filed for the annulment. I moved back in with my parents until I was strong enough to get my own place, and I cut Michael out of our lives completely. Sarah's hands clenched on the pages. This was the choice that had shaped her entire existence, the decision that had made her fatherless. She wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at her mother for robbing her of Michael, for robbing Michael of her. But Eleanor's next words caught her before the anger could fully form. I know what you're thinking. I know how selfish it sounds, how cruel. Believe me, I've spent 42 years asking myself if I made the right choice. But Sarah, here's what I need you to understand. I didn't do it to hurt Michael, and I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because I was drowning and I couldn't see any other way to survive. After you were born, I had what I now know was severe postpartum depression, compounded by PTSD from the medical trauma. But back then, in 1975, people didn't talk about those things. Women were just expected to bounce back, to be grateful for their healthy babies, to cope. I couldn't cope. I could barely get out of bed. I had intrusive thoughts about dying, about you dying, about everything falling apart. The only thing that kept me going was the structure my parents provided, my mother taking care of you while I slept 14 hours a day, my father making sure I ate the rigid routine that didn't require me to make any decisions or feel any complicated emotions. Michael represented everything I couldn't handle, the passion, the intensity, the weight of what we'd done to be together. Every time I looked at him, I thought about Diane in the hospital, about my own body failing, about the price everyone had paid for our love. I couldn't live with that. I couldn't be his wife and your mother and hold all that guilt at the same time. Something had to give, and I chose to let him go. The letter went on, describing the years that followed, how Eleanor had slowly healed, had found medication that helped, had built a life for herself and Sarah that felt manageable if not joyful. How she'd taken the money Michael sent every month, he'd kept that promise, had supported his daughter financially, even though he wasn't allowed to know her, and put it in a savings account that eventually paid for Sarah's college education. How she'd watched Sarah grow up, and seen Michael in every smile, every gesture, every moment of kindness. I want you to know that I never stopped loving him, Eleanor had written. That's why I kept the letters, kept the ring, kept his picture hidden in the Bible where I read it every night. I've prayed for him every single day of your life, asked God to give him peace and happiness and love, even if it couldn't be with me. And I've prayed for you too, that you would be strong enough to forgive me when you learned the truth, that you would understand I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. But there was more, another revelation that Sarah hadn't anticipated. There's something else you need to know. About 5 years after we separated, Michael found me. He'd moved to Portland by then, had started teaching, had built a life, but he wrote to me, sent the letter to my parents' house because he didn't know my new address. My mother intercepted it, never told me about it until years later, when she was dying and felt guilty about all the secrets she'd kept. In the letter, Michael said he'd met someone, a woman named Patricia, and he was thinking about proposing to her. But he couldn't do it, couldn't commit to another relationship without knowing for certain that there was no chance for us. He asked if I'd be willing to meet him, to talk, to see if there was anything left to salvage. Sarah's heart contracted painfully. This was the moment, the chance for reconciliation, for her parents to find their way back to each other. By the time my mother finally gave me that letter, it was 6 months old. Michael had already married Patricia. I called him anyway, told him I'd never received the letter, apologized for my mother's interference. He was kind about it, said he understood, said he hoped I was happy. We talked for 2 hours, about everything and nothing, about you. I told him what you were like, bright and curious and so much stronger than I'd ever been. He cried. I'd never heard Michael Carver cry before, but he wept on the phone, grieving all the years he'd missed, all the moments he'd never get back. He asked if he could meet you. Just once, just to see you, to talk to you, and Sarah, I said no. I told him it would be too confusing for you, too disruptive. You were 11 years old, settled in your life, asking fewer questions about your father. I convinced myself I was protecting you from pain, from the complication of having to share your heart between two parents who lived on opposite sides of the country, who had so much history and hurt between them. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. I was afraid that if you met him, you'd love him more than you loved me, that you'd blame me for keeping you apart, that I'd lose you the same way I'd lost him. So I said no, and Michael accepted it because he'd always accepted my decisions, even when they tore him apart. That was the last time we spoke. He sent birthday cards for you every year after that, addressed to me, and I saved them all. They're in a box in the back of my closet. I never gave them to you. That's another choice I've regretted every day since. The final page of the letter was blurred by water damage. No, not water damage, Sarah realized. Tear stains. Her mother had been crying when she wrote this, decades of grief and guilt finally spilling out onto the page. I'm telling you all of this now because I'm dying, and I can't take these secrets to my grave without giving you the choice I never gave you before. Your father is a good man. He loved you before you were born, and he's grieved your absence every day of your life. If you want to find him, if you want to know him, you have my blessing. More than my blessing, my encouragement. Don't make my mistakes, Sarah. Don't let fear and guilt keep you from the people who love you. I know I failed you in this. I know I should have been braver, should have let you have a relationship with Michael no matter how much it scared me. But I was broken in ways I didn't understand, and I made choices that seemed right at the time, but caused so much unnecessary pain. I hope you can forgive me. I hope you can understand that I loved you more than anything in this world, even if I didn't always show it in the right ways. The letter was signed, Your mother who loves you forever, Eleanor Rose Mitchell. Sarah sat in the attic with her mother's confession, with Michael's letters, with all the evidence of love and loss and impossible choices. The November sun had moved across the sky while she read, and now shadows stretched long across the floor, turning everything soft and golden and sad. She felt hollowed out, emptied of anger, filled instead with a grief so profound it seemed to have its own weight, its own gravity. Her mother had been sick, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, struggling with demons that 1970s medicine didn't know how to fight. She'd made terrible choices, yes, but she'd made them from a place of survival, not cruelty. And she'd lived with the consequences every single day, had carried the weight of those decisions until it had become as much a part of her as her own heartbeat. Could Sarah forgive her? She didn't know yet. The betrayal still stung. The loss of 42 years with a father who'd wanted her still felt like an open wound. But she understood now, at least. She understood why. And Michael. God, Michael. He'd lost so much. His first love. His daughter. The family he'd dreamed of building. And he'd borne it all with grace, had respected Eleanor's boundaries even when they killed him, had sent money and birthday cards and prayers into the void, hoping somehow they'd reach the child he'd never been allowed to know. Sarah pulled out her phone again, looked at his picture on the professional networking site. Michael J. Carver, Portland, Oregon, retired history teacher, her father. She composed a message in her head. Dear Michael, you don't know me, but I'm Sarah Mitchell, Eleanor Mitchell's daughter, your daughter. I found your letters, and I need to talk to you. But before she could type it, her eye caught something else in the trunk, something she'd missed before in her haste to read the letters. A smaller box, flat and rectangular, pushed into the corner beneath a stack of Sarah's old school papers. She pulled it out carefully, this last secret. The box was the kind that held greeting cards, sturdy cardboard with a floral pattern on the lid. Inside, exactly as Eleanor had written, were birthday cards. Dozens of them, one for each year of Sarah's life. She opened them in order, starting with her first birthday. The card showed a cartoon bunny with balloons. Inside, Michael had written, To my beautiful daughter on her first birthday. I don't know if you're walking yet, or what your favorite food is, or what makes you laugh. But I know I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Happy birthday, Sarah, your father. The second birthday. You're 2 today. Are you talking yet? I imagine you have a lot to say. Your mother was always good with words. Always knew exactly what she thought and how to express it. I hope you got that from her. I hope you got her courage too, and her kindness, and her beautiful smile. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Fifth birthday. You're starting kindergarten this year, or maybe you already did. I wonder if you're nervous or excited, if you made friends easily, if you like your teacher. I hope school is everything you want it to be. I hope you're happy. That's all I've ever wanted for you, to be happy and safe and loved. Your mother is giving you that, I know she is. She's an extraordinary woman, and you're lucky to have her. But just so you know, there's someone else out here who loves you too, even if you don't know him. Happy birthday, Sarah. 10th birthday. Double digits. You're growing up, becoming your own person. I wonder who that person is, what you care about, what your dreams are. Do you like sports or art or science? Do you have your mother's voice, soft and musical? Do you have my stubborn streak, the one that gets me in trouble sometimes? I wish I could know these things. I wish I could see you, just once, to know that you're real and thriving. But I settle for imagining you, and in my imagination you're perfect. Happy birthday, my girl. 16th birthday. You're driving now, probably. That terrifies me and makes me proud at the same time, which I'm learning is just part of being a parent, even a parent from a distance. I hope you're careful on the roads. I hope you're making good choices. I hope you know, somehow, that there's a man in Portland who thinks about you every single day, who keeps your picture on his desk even though it's from when you were a baby, who tells his students about his daughter on the other side of the country. They ask why I don't see you, and I tell them it's complicated, which is the truth even if it's not the whole truth. Happy birthday, Sarah. You're halfway to 32, which is how old your mother was the last time I saw her. Time is strange like that. 21st birthday. You're an adult now, legally and in every way that matters. I wonder if you've finished college or if you're still working on your degree. I wonder what you're studying, what kind of career you want. Your mother told me once years ago that you were bright and curious, and I'd bet anything that's still true. I hope the world is treating you kindly. I hope you're finding your way, making your mark. And I hope, maybe, that someday you'll want to find me too. I'm not hard to locate if you ever look. Happy birthday, Sarah. I'm so proud of you, even though I don't have the right to be. 30th birthday. 3 decades. I can't believe it's been 30 years since you were born, since I held you for those brief minutes in the hospital before your mother asked me to leave. You felt so small in my arms, so impossibly fragile. I was terrified I'd drop you or hurt you somehow. But you just looked at me with those dark eyes, so serious and wise, like you knew exactly who I was and what I'd lost. I've been chasing that moment ever since, trying to get back to it, trying to understand how it all went so wrong. But I'm grateful for it too, that one perfect moment when I got to be your father in more than just name. Happy birthday, Sarah. I love you. I've always loved you. I'll always love you. 42nd birthday. The last card, written just 8 months ago, shortly after Eleanor had been diagnosed. The handwriting was shakier now, Michael's age showing in the slight tremor of the letters. My dearest Sarah, I'm 78 years old now, and I've been writing these cards for 42 years. I don't know if you'll ever read them. I don't know if your mother even kept them, or if they went straight from the mailbox to the trash. But I've kept writing them anyway, because it's the only connection I have to you, the only way I can be a father to the daughter I've never known. I'm getting older, and my health isn't what it used to be. I have to face the possibility that I might die without ever meeting you, without ever hearing your voice or knowing if you're happy or telling you in person how much you've meant to me all these years. That breaks my heart. But I want you to know, wherever you are, whatever your life looks like, that you have been loved. Deeply, constantly, unconditionally loved by a man who gave up the right to call himself your father, but never stopped being one in his heart. If by some miracle you're reading this, if somehow these words find their way to you, please know that it's not too late. It's never too late. I'm still here. I'm still your dad. And I'm still hoping. Happy birthday, Sarah. All my love, always and forever, Michael. Sarah pressed the card to her chest, her body shaking with sobs that had been 42 years in the making. All this time, all these years. He'd been there, loving her from a distance, marking every birthday, every milestone, every moment of her life that he'd been excluded from. And she'd never known. She'd grown up thinking she came from nowhere, thinking her father was a blank space, a question mark, a void. When in reality, she'd come from this, from love so persistent it had survived decades of separation, from a man who'd chosen to be her father, even when he wasn't allowed to act like one. She looked at her phone, at Michael's picture still open on the screen. 79 years old now, retired, living in Portland, still there, still hoping. Sarah didn't let herself think about it too much, didn't let fear or doubt creep in. She just typed, her thumbs clumsy on the screen, tears blurring her vision. "Dear Michael, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm Eleanor's daughter, your daughter. My mother passed away 3 months ago, and while going through her things, I found your letters, all of them. The ones you wrote to her in the 1970s and the birthday cards you've been sending for 42 years. I've spent the last 6 hours reading them, and I need you to know something. I'm here. I'm real. I'm alive and well, and I've been loved by an extraordinary mother, just like you hoped I would be. But I've also been missing something my whole life, and now I know what it was. It was you. I don't know if you still want to meet me. I don't know if I'm too late or if this will just reopen old wounds, but I had to reach out. I had to tell you that I know the truth now, and I don't blame you for anything. You didn't abandon me. You fought for me, and when you couldn't fight anymore, you loved me anyway in every way you could. That's more than most people get from the parents who raised them. I'm in Ohio right now, settling my mother's estate. But I could come to Portland. I could meet you if you want that. We could talk. We could, I don't know, maybe we could just sit together and not have to imagine each other anymore. If you're willing, I'm here. I've always been here. Your daughter, Sarah." She read it over 3 times, her heart hammering, then hit send before she could change her mind. The response came faster than she expected. Just 20 minutes later, her phone buzzing with a notification. Sarah's hands shook so badly she almost dropped it. "Sarah. Oh my God, Sarah. I've been staring at your message for 10 minutes, afraid if I look away it will disappear, and I'll realize I imagined it. You're real, you're here, you found the letters. I don't even know what to say except yes. Yes, I want to meet you. Yes, come to Portland. Come tomorrow if you can. Come today if flights exist. I've waited 42 years for this. I can't believe it's finally happening. I'm crying as I write this. My wife Patricia is asking what's wrong, and I'm trying to explain that nothing's wrong. Everything is finally right. Sarah, I have so much to tell you, so many years to try to compress into whatever time we have left. But mostly I just want to see you. I want to know what your voice sounds like, what makes you laugh, whether you drink coffee or tea, whether you got your mother's musical ear or my terrible singing voice. I want to know you. Please come. Please let me be your father, even if it's 42 years late. All my love, Michael. P.S. Do you go by Sarah or Sally or something else? I've been calling you Sarah in my head all these years, but I realized I don't actually know what you prefer. Everything about you is a gift I never thought I'd get to unwrap." Sarah laughed and cried at the same time, the sound breaking out of her like something wild and joyful. She typed back, "Just Sarah, and I drink coffee, black, no sugar. I can't sing at all, so that must be from you. I'll book a flight for tomorrow. Can't wait to meet you. Your daughter." 3 days later, Sarah stood on the porch of a small craftsman house in a tree-lined Portland neighborhood, her hand raised to knock, her heart in her throat. The door opened before she could, and there he was, Michael Carver, in the flesh, real and solid, and looking at her with the same dark eyes she saw in the mirror every morning. "Sarah," he said, and the way he said her name, with wonder and grief and joy all tangled together, made her start crying all over again. "Hi, Dad," she managed, and then they were hugging. This man she'd never met and yet had known her entire life, his arms around her feeling like coming home to a place she'd never been. They spent the weekend talking stories spilling out in no particular order, Michael showing her pictures of his life, his wife Patricia, welcoming her with warmth and kindness, Sarah sharing memories of Eleanor, both of them crying and laughing, and marveling at how much time had been lost and how much could still be found. On Sunday morning, Michael took her to his favorite coffee shop, a local place with mismatched chairs and sun streaming through tall windows. They sat across from each other, hands wrapped around warm mugs, and Michael pulled something from his jacket pocket. "I've carried this every day since you were born," he said, sliding it across the table. It was the other wedding ring, the match to the one Sarah had found in Eleanor's wooden box. She pulled that one from her own pocket now, where she'd been carrying it like a talisman, and set it beside Michael's. The two rings sat there between them, separated for 42 years, reunited at last. "She never stopped loving you," Sarah said quietly. "She told me in her letter. She kept your picture in her Bible, read your letters over and over. She was broken in ways she didn't know how to fix." "I know," Michael said, his eyes distant with memory. "I was angry for a long time, I won't lie about that, but anger fades and understanding grows. Your mother did what she thought she had to do to survive, to give you the best life she could, and look at you." He reached across the table, took Sarah's hand. "You're extraordinary. You're kind and brave and curious, and you turned out exactly right. Maybe it happened in a painful way, but it happened. We're here now, that's what matters." They sat like that for a long time, father and daughter. Two people who'd lost 4 decades but found each other anyway. Outside, Portland went about its Sunday morning. People walking dogs and buying groceries and living their ordinary lives. But for Sarah and Michael, this was no ordinary moment. This was redemption, reconciliation, the answer to 42 years of prayers sent into the darkness by two people who'd loved each other and lost each other, and through Sarah had finally found a way back. "There's something I want to do," Sarah said eventually. "I want to take you to Ohio, to where Mom is buried. I want you to be able to say goodbye properly. To tell her," her voice broke, "to tell her we found each other, that she doesn't have to worry anymore." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "I'd like that. Thank you." 6 weeks later, they stood together in the small cemetery on the edge of town, winter wind biting at their faces, Eleanor's grave covered in a dusting of early snow. Sarah had brought forget-me-nots, the only flowers blooming this late in the season, purchased from a greenhouse, and she placed them on the headstone while Michael knelt in the frozen grass, one hand pressed to the earth as if he could reach through soil and stone and time to touch the woman he'd never stopped loving. "Hello, Eleanor," he said softly. "I brought our daughter to meet you. She's perfect, just like you said she'd be. I wish you could see her, but I think maybe you can. I think maybe you've been watching over her all along, the way you always did, fierce and protective and full of love." He paused, his breath misting in the cold air. "I forgive you for everything, and I hope wherever you are you've forgiven yourself too. We're okay. All 3 of us are finally okay." Sarah knelt beside him, and together they cried for what was lost and celebrated what remained. The forget-me-nots blew against white snow, a father and daughter reunited, a love story that had taken 42 years to reach its proper ending. And somewhere, Sarah thought, her mother was watching, was finally at peace, knowing that the letter she'd left hidden in the Bible had done exactly what she'd hoped it would. It had changed everything.